Who could have imagined that a man who measured life only in profit margins and percentages would one day find himself silenced by a single sentence from his own secretary? When he called her a distraction in front of the entire boardroom, he thought he had put her in her place. Instead, he set in motion the very chain of events that would expose betrayal, change his company forever, and force him to face a truth he never expected: that the girl he dismissed would become the compass of his life. Before we dive into the story, comment below where you're watching from. Enjoy the story, everyone. The glass walls of Crawford Enterprises reflected the city skyline like a mirror of power. Cold, gleaming, unshakable. Inside, the Monday morning meeting buzzed with tension. Numbers flashed on the screen, voices murmured, and at the head of the table sat Alexander Crawford, CEO. His sharp gray eyes scanned the charts as if they were scripture. For him, the only language worth speaking was data. Q2 is underperforming, he said, voice even and controlled. Efficiency is slipping. People are distracted. His gaze cut across the table like a blade, landing on the young woman standing near the projector. Riley Morgan, new to the company, hired as an internal coordinator barely 2 weeks ago. She had been asked to run the slides, but her hand had shot up earlier, suggesting that morale might be affecting the numbers. Alexander's lips curled. Distraction, he repeated, this time looking directly at her. And you, Miss Morgan, are proof of it. Please leave the analysis to people who understand it. A ripple of awkward laughter swept through the room. Riley felt heat rise to her cheeks. She bit the inside of her lip, her pride burning, but she didn't bow her head. Not this time. When the meeting ended, she walked straight to her small corner desk, ignoring the sympathetic glances from a few colleagues. Her fingers itched for a response, not with words, he had plenty of those, but with action. Something visible. Something that would turn his insult into fuel. She opened a fresh board on the wall near her station, scribbled across the top in bright marker, "Small wins." At first it seemed silly. Sticky notes in different colors where people could write tiny good deeds they'd witnessed. Helped a teammate debug late at night. Brought muffins to the early shift. Stayed late to prepare a client's file. By lunchtime, 3 notes were stuck on the board. By the next morning, there were 12. By the end of the week, 50. The wall was alive with color. Alexander noticed. Of course he did. Every morning he passed that board with its childish scrawl of kindness. He told himself it was pointless. Yet he found his eyes straying there, reading the notes in silence. He hated to admit it, but something in him stirred when he saw the names of people he'd barely thought about. The janitor, the receptionist, the intern. They mattered to her, therefore they began to exist in his world too. But Alexander Crawford would never let that show. "Miss Morgan," he said coolly one morning, catching her as she added another sticky note. "If you put half as much effort into actual work as you do into decorating walls, we might not be bleeding productivity." Riley turned, marker still in hand. "Funny thing, Mr. Crawford," she said, her voice calm but steady. "I think these little notes are productivity. You just haven't learned how to measure them yet." For the first time in years, he didn't have an immediate comeback. And for reasons he didn't dare name, that unsettled him far more than slipping numbers ever could. The next Monday arrived with storm clouds pressing against the city, and yet inside the glass tower, something unusual was happening. The usual sluggish shuffle of employees toward their desks was replaced by light chatter, even laughter. Coffee cups clinked. Someone brought in homemade banana bread, and the small wins board overflowed with color. Notes spilled over the edges, taped in little clusters like a mosaic of gratitude. Riley stood a few feet away, pretending to adjust the markers, but really she was just watching. People were writing down things she hadn't even known happened. Small acts in hidden corners of the building, where no CEO ever looked. She felt a swelling pride, not for herself, but for them. It was proof. Morale wasn't fluff. It was fuel. Then she felt it, that unmistakable presence, cool and controlled, like a shadow cutting through warmth. Alexander Crawford stopped in front of the board, his tailored suit crisp, his face unreadable. The chatter dimmed. People hurried back to their desks. He was, as always, gravity in human form. His gray eyes skimmed the sticky notes, covered a shift for a sick colleague, helped the intern with her presentation, made sure the janitorial staff had dinner vouchers. He read silently, jaw tightening. Then, without looking at Riley, he said in a low voice only she could hear, "Correlation does not mean causation." Riley tilted her head. "Neither does dismissal mean you're right." A dangerous spark flickered in his eyes. Annoyance, maybe curiosity. He should have ended the exchange there. Instead, he lingered. "You're implying these sentimental gestures are driving performance?" "I'm not implying," Riley said, folding her arms. "I'm proving it. Give me access to last month's performance reports by department, and I'll show you." A silence stretched between them, charged like static. Then, to everyone's shock, including his own, Alexander said, "Fine, 1 week," and walked away. The whole office buzzed after he left. People whispered. She challenged him. She didn't get fired. Riley forced herself to keep her shoulders straight, but inside, adrenaline roared. That night, she stayed late, cross-referencing data. Hours bled into dawn. She lined up productivity metrics with kindness notes. Patterns emerged. Departments with the highest small wins showed the sharpest upticks in client satisfaction, turnaround time, even revenue. It wasn't just morale. It was measurable. The next morning, she carried the printouts into his office. He sat behind a desk like an emperor at court, tie knotted tight, eyes cool. She laid the pages in front of him, her heart pounding. Alexander scanned them silently, his expression unreadable. At last he leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "Interesting. That's it?" she blurted, unable to stop herself. "Not even a good work, Riley?" His mouth twitched. Not a smile, not yet, but something close. "Don't get used to it," he said, but his voice was softer than before. For the first time, Riley noticed something in his gaze that wasn't purely ice. It unsettled her. Dangerous, she thought, because if she wasn't careful, she might start looking for warmth in the very man who'd called her nothing but a distraction. And Alexander, as she left his office, caught himself watching the way the light caught in her hair. He looked away quickly, annoyed with himself. Feelings were inefficient. And yet, the week wore on, and the buzz around the small wins board refused to fade. Alexander pretended not to notice, but Riley saw the way his steps slowed when he passed it, the way his gaze lingered a fraction longer than before. One late evening, when the office was nearly empty, Riley sat hunched over a stack of spreadsheets in the dim glow of her desk lamp. She wasn't snooping, not exactly. She was double-checking numbers Alexander had reluctantly allowed her to review. At first, it was ordinary. Expenses, vendor payments, quarterly forecasts. But then something snagged her eye. 2 identical invoices. Same vendor name. Same date. Same amount. Riley frowned. She flipped through the file again. It wasn't a typo. One was real. The other looked like a mirror image, slipped in to bleed money from the company. Her stomach tightened. And it wasn't the only one. She found more, buried deep under layers of transactions. A cold realization washed over her. Someone inside was funneling funds. someone trusted. The sound of footsteps startled her. She looked up to see Alexander in the doorway, his tie loosened, his expression guarded. "You're still here," he said, his voice low, carrying more weariness than command. "So are you," Riley shot back, closing the file halfway. He studied her, then crossed the room. "What did you find?" Riley hesitated. Should she tell him? He was the CEO, but he was also the man who had dismissed her not long ago. Still, something in his face, in the lines carved by exhaustion, made her choose honesty. "Duplicate invoices," she whispered. "Money disappearing into a shell vendor. This isn't a mistake." Alexander's eyes hardened. He reached for the file, scanning the pages, his jaw clenched. And then Riley saw something she hadn't expected. Not anger, but hurt. "Robert," he muttered under his breath. "Robert." He looked up at her, and for the first time the mask of control slipped. "Robert Chun, our CFO. He's been with me since the beginning. His voice caught for a second. "We grew up together. I trusted him." The silence between them was heavy, charged not with sarcasm this time, but something raw. Riley laid a hand gently on the desk, not touching him, just steady. "Then maybe it's time you trusted me instead." His eyes flicked to hers, searching. For a heartbeat, the office was no longer glass and steel but something softer, more fragile. He exhaled, a sound halfway between surrender and relief. "Don't tell anyone else yet," he said quietly. "If you're right, this isn't just theft. It's betrayal." Riley nodded, but her heart beat faster for reasons that had nothing to do with numbers. Because in that moment, she saw not the CEO, not the cold strategist, but a man who looked almost breakable. And it terrified her how much she wanted to be the one to steady him. Alexander closed the file with a snap, but his eyes lingered on her. Longer than they should have, longer than he meant to allow. And when Riley finally turned to leave, she could feel his gaze on her back. Not cold, not dismissive, but something dangerously close to longing. The next morning, Alexander barely spoke in the executive meeting. His usual cutting remarks were gone, replaced by silence that unnerved the entire board. Riley, seated 2 rows back with her notepad, caught glimpses of his jaw tightening every time Robert Chun leaned forward with that practiced smile. When the meeting ended, Alexander's voice cut through the air. "Miss Morgan, stay." Heads turned. A few smirked, assuming another scolding was coming. Riley held her ground as the room emptied until only Alexander, Robert, and 2 assistants remained. Then, with one glance, he dismissed everyone except her. As the door clicked shut, he leaned against the table, arms folded. "Tell me exactly what you found. Every detail." Riley laid out the invoices, her finger tapping each suspicious duplicate. "Look, same vendor name, same day, exact same amounts. Different account numbers. Whoever's behind it isn't even subtle. They knew no one checks past a surface audit." Alexander's eyes burned into the paper, then lifted to her. "And you're certain?" "Yes." She hesitated. "I know it's hard to hear, but it's Robert." The words came out clipped, final. He rubbed his temple. "He's been with me since I had nothing. We built this place together." Riley softened. Sometimes the people closest to us know exactly where to cut deepest. For a moment he looked older, the weight of years pressing down. Then he straightened, mask snapping back into place. "We need proof. Solid proof. If I confront him now, he'll deny it, shred every trace, and the board will believe him over you." His gaze lingered, as if regretting the harshness, then softened. "Over us." Riley blinked. Did he just say us? "So what do we do?" she asked, her voice quieter than she intended. Alexander walked to the window, staring at the city lights. We set a trap. That night, in his private office, they sketched the plan across whiteboards. Riley paced, gesturing with the marker. If we generate a fake vendor account and route a tiny payment through it, Robert won't be able to resist. He'll try to duplicate it just like the others. Alexander leaned back in his chair, studying her. And you know how to build a convincing trail? Riley arched an eyebrow. I may not have your empire, Mr. Crawford, but I did survive 3 years of working in admin for a law firm. I can fake paperwork in my sleep. For the first time all night, a laugh escaped him, low, unexpected, genuine. Startled them both. Riley froze mid-step, then slowly smiled. There it is, she teased softly. Proof you're not made of stone. He cleared his throat, turning serious again, but the flicker of warmth lingered in his eyes. Don't tell anyone you saw that. They worked side by side until the city outside turned dark. At one point, their hands brushed as they both reached for the same folder. Riley pulled back quickly, but not before she felt the spark. His hand lingered a second longer than necessary. Careful, she whispered, almost to herself. Of what? His voice was low, unreadable. She met his gaze, heart racing. Of getting distracted. The corner of his mouth curved, just slightly. Maybe not all distractions are bad. Silence hung heavy, thick with things neither dared say. Then Riley forced herself back to the files, cheeks warm. Alexander turned away, but inside, his carefully built walls were already cracking. The day of the board meeting arrived like a storm front. Riley adjusted the cuffs of her blouse as she carried the neatly prepared folders into the glass-walled conference room. She'd barely slept. Every calculation, every forged trail, every small risk was now condensed into the documents stacked in her hands. Alexander was already there, tall and unreadable in his charcoal suit. Only the faint shadow under his eyes betrayed the sleepless nights. When Riley set the folders before him, his hand brushed hers. Just for a second. It was enough to send a current up her arm. Ready? She whispered. He didn't look at her, but his jaw flexed. As I'll ever be. The board assembled, murmurs filling the space. Robert Chun entered last, all smiles, clapping Alexander on the back as if nothing was amiss. Another quarter, another mountain to climb, he said cheerfully. Alexander's expression barely moved. Yes, he replied. Let's talk about mountains. The meeting began with standard reports, growth forecasts, expansion strategies. Robert spoke with his usual confidence, presenting graphs that painted everything in a flattering light. Riley sat at the far end, pulse hammering, waiting for Alexander's cue. At last, he leaned forward. One item remains, a vendor audit. The room quieted. Robert blinked, masking surprise with a chuckle. An audit? Alex, really? We've never needed. Humor me. Alexander's voice was steel. Miss Morgan, present the files. Riley rose, every eye on her. She slid copies down the polished table, her hands steady though her heart pounded. Last week, I noticed unusual duplication in vendor invoices. Payments routed to what appeared to be a consulting firm. Hartman and Associates. She paused. Except the firm doesn't exist. Whispers rippled through the board. Robert shifted in his seat, laugh brittle. This is absurd. A rookie coordinator playing detective? Alex, surely. Continue, Miss Morgan. Alexander cut in, his gaze never leaving Robert. Riley flipped the page. So we ran a test. A small, artificial payment routed to a decoy vendor. Within 48 hours, an identical invoice appeared. Same amount, different account. The funds were redirected. She let the silence hang. Into an account linked directly to Robert Chin. The room froze. Robert slammed a hand on the table. Lies. Fabrications. You think a secretary can outwit 20 years of financial oversight? She didn't outwit you, Alexander said, his voice low, deadly calm. She simply noticed what I should have, what trust blinded me to. He pushed the final file across the table. The proof is there. Transfers, accounts, signatures. Check them yourselves. One by one, the board members bent over the pages. Murmurs swelled, sharp and angry. Robert's face reddened, the mask slipping. You'll regret this, he hissed, rising from his chair. You think this company is yours without me? You're nothing without. Enough. For the first time in years, Alexander raised his voice, cracked through the room like thunder. You stole from this company. You stole from me. And you underestimated her. He glanced at Riley just for a heartbeat, but enough for everyone to see. Security entered at the nod of his head. Robert struggled, spat curses, but was escorted out. The door slammed. Silence reigned. Then one of the senior board members cleared his throat. Alex, if what's here is true, you saved us. But I have to say, he looked at Riley. It seems you had help. All eyes turned to her. Riley's face warmed, but before she could speak, Alexander did. Yes, he said firmly. She did more than help. She saw what none of us saw. She saved this company. Gasps. Shock. Alexander Crawford, the untouchable CEO, giving credit publicly. When the meeting adjourned, the room emptied quickly, leaving only the two of them. Riley clutched her notes to her chest, breath unsteady. You didn't have to defend me, she said softly. I did. Alexander stepped closer. Because you were right. About the numbers. About Robert. About everything. His voice faltered, uncharacteristically human. She swallowed hard. And about distractions? Something flickered in his eyes. Vulnerability, raw and real. He reached up, almost touched her face, but stopped short, his hand trembling just inches away. Not a distraction, he murmured. A compass. For a moment, time held still. The city pulsed outside, but inside that glass room, there was only the two of them, breathing the same unsteady air, balanced on the edge of something dangerous and undeniable. The fallout was immediate. News of Robert Chen's arrest spread like wildfire through the building. Employees whispered in hallways, emails buzzed, investors demanded explanations. For the first time in years, Alexander allowed himself to stay out of sight, letting his legal team handle the chaos. But Riley couldn't avoid the ripple effect. Everywhere she went, people stopped her. Is it true? You caught him. You saved the company? She tried to laugh it off, insisting it wasn't just her. But deep inside, pride swelled. Not for the recognition, but because she had proven that kindness and vigilance mattered. Late one evening, as she gathered her things, her phone buzzed. A known number. She hesitated, then answered. Miss Morgan? Andrew Collins. From Weston Capital. Her brow furrowed. Oh, hello. I heard about your impressive work. Our firm could use someone like you. We'd like to discuss a position. Compensation would be significant. His tone was smooth, confident, tempting. Think about it. You'd have resources beyond anything Crawford Enterprises can offer. Riley's throat tightened. She thanked him politely and hung up, her mind spinning. The next morning, Alexander found her standing by the small winds board, staring at it as if searching for answers. You're quiet, he observed. She glanced at him. I got an offer. His chest tightened. From who? Weston Capital. Andrew Collins. Silence. He stepped closer, too close. And are you considering it? Riley crossed her arms, defensive. Why shouldn't I? They see my value. They're offering me. I know what they're offering. He cut in sharply. Then softer. But I know what they can't give you. Her brows furrowed. And what's that? He exhaled, a sound heavy with restraint. This. Before she could react, Alexander reached past her and plucked a sticky note off the board. He held it between them. It read, "Thank you, Riley, for believing in us when no one else did." He met her eyes. They can't give you this. The trust you've built. The lives you've changed here. They can throw money at you, but they can't give you purpose. His voice dipped, almost breaking. And they can't give you me. Her breath caught. Alexander. I tried to fight it. He admitted, words tumbling out faster now, as if a dam had burst. I told myself you were a distraction. But the truth is, you're the first person who's made me want to be better. Not just as a CEO. As a man. Riley's heart pounded. She had imagined him saying many things, but not this, not so raw, not so unguarded. You don't have to decide now, he continued, eyes searching hers. But if you stay, I need you to know, you're not just saving this company. You've saved me. For a long moment, she couldn't speak. The weight of his confession pressed against every wall she'd built to keep her heart safe. Slowly, she reached up, taking the sticky note from his hand, her fingers brushing his. I'm not leaving, she whispered. Not for money. Not for anyone. Relief flickered across his face, so palpable it almost hurt to see. He stepped back half a pace, forcing control, but the warmth in his gaze gave him away. Good, he murmured, voice husky, because I'm not ready to lose you. Riley smiled faintly, though her cheeks burned. Careful, Mr. Crawford. Sounds like you're getting distracted. For the first time, he didn't deflect, didn't argue. He let the word hang, his lips curving into something that was almost a smile. And Riley, standing before him, realized she was dangerously close to wanting that smile more than anything in the world. 2 months later, Crawford Enterprises didn't look the same. The small wins board had multiplied, now every floor had one. Staff meetings began with shout-outs for kindness, not just performance. Turnover dropped, morale surged, and investors, skeptical at first, couldn't argue with the numbers. One morning, Riley walked into the lobby and paused. Where once there had been a cold marble wall engraved with quarterly goals, a new sign gleamed, first people, then numbers. Beneath it, in smaller letters, Company Credo 2024. She shook her head, smiling. He actually did it. That evening, after the last of the employees left, Alexander called her into his office. The blinds were half drawn, casting long shadows across the room. He stood by the window, jacket off, tie loosened, looking less like a CEO and more like a man stripped of armor. You've changed this place, he said without turning. So have you, Riley replied softly. He finally faced her. His eyes, those sharp gray eyes, no longer looked like blades. They were human, vulnerable. I used to think leading meant control. Numbers. Precision. Now I see it meant listening. And trusting you. Her throat tightened. You trusted me with the company. That was enough. No, he stepped closer, each stride slow, deliberate. It's not enough anymore. Her heart hammered as he stopped in front of her, so close she could feel the heat radiating from him. Riley. His voice faltered, then steadied. Stay. Not just as my compass at work. Stay with me. She swallowed, her defenses trembling. You don't have to say this. You've already given me more than I'm not giving you anything. He cut in, almost desperate. I'm asking. For the first time in years, I'm asking. Because without you, this building is just glass. These numbers are just ink. And I? His hand hovered, then finally cupped her cheek, trembling with restraint. I'm just a man who lost himself. Her breath hitched, and for a moment she couldn't speak. Then, with a shaky smile, she whispered, "Good thing you found a compass, then." Something in him broke, the last wall crumbling. He leaned in, and when their lips met, it wasn't rushed or desperate, but steady, certain, as if the world had finally aligned. The kiss deepened, slow but unrelenting, years of silence and loneliness dissolving into warmth. Riley's hands slid to his shoulders, grounding him. For the first time since his empire began, Alexander Crawford let go of control, and it felt like freedom. Later, they sat on the rooftop terrace, city lights sprawling beneath them. Riley leaned against him, his arm draped around her. Neither spoke for a long while. The hum of traffic below, the soft night air, the quiet beat of his heart under her cheek. It was enough. Finally, Alexander whispered, "Do you remember the first thing I called you?" Riley chuckled. "A distraction." He smiled, genuine and unguarded at last. "I was wrong. You were never a distraction. You were the direction I'd been searching for." She tilted her face up, her eyes glistening in the city glow. "And you? You were the lesson I didn't know I needed." They kissed again, slower this time, as the skyline shimmered around them. Not as CEO and secretary, not as boss and employee, but as two people who had found what neither money nor numbers could ever buy. And in that quiet rooftop moment, Alexander Crawford and Riley Morgan sealed their unspoken vow. First people, then numbers, and above all, each other.